All right, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates on tonight's show. I have a very special guest. His name is John Noltner, Noltner, and he's publishing a book on September 21st, 2021. The title of that book is Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. Very important book for these times, I'm sure. John Noltner is a photographer, author, and activist based in Minneapolis. Within the last year, not so much, but he's the founder and executive director for A Piece of My Mind, a multimedia arts project that uses portraits and personal stories to bridge divides and encourage dialogue around important issues. Through exhibits, workshops, lectures, and on-site studios, A Piece of My Mind leads to transformative experiences that help a polarized world rediscover the common humanity that connects us. And you can go see that website at www.apomm.net again, www.apomm.net. And so John can talk about this book. So Mr. Noltner, are you there?
I am. Hi, William. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, well, thanks for agreeing to the interview. For people, this is your first book, is my understanding. So people who haven't heard your name, can you talk about your background, talk about your multimedia project, and what led you to write this book? It's a long question.
Yeah, of course. And well done on my last name. Nobody ever says it right. Thank you for that. This is actually our third book. The first two for A Piece of My Mind were self-published. This is our first book with a publisher, and so this is being brought out by Broadleaf Books out of Minneapolis. But the overall project, A Piece of My Mind, is something that I started about a dozen years ago. I'd spent my career as a freelance photographer, shooting for national magazines and Fortune 500 companies. Did a lot of travel photography around the United States and around the world. I think I probably photographed in about 38 countries through my career. And through that process, I started, I encountered so many different kinds of people, and I found beauty and wisdom in all of it. As we were coming into the recession back in 2008, 2009, I was increasingly frustrated with the quality of our national dialogue. I was concerned about all of the things that ask us to look at what can separate us. And I wondered if there was something that I could do with my photography and storytelling instead to remember what connects us, to sort of rediscover that common humanity. As luck would have it, the recession handed me some free time.
A lot of people, not just you, a lot of people, right?
Yeah, a lot
myself
of people.
Included.
It hit the world of freelance photography pretty hard, and my workload dropped quickly and dramatically. And if I was a better business person, I would have used that time to look for new clients. But instead, my soul was a little bit hungry, and I wanted to take that time to feed my soul. So I started just interviewing people. We'd sit down, we'd do an hour-long recorded conversation. I would shoot a portrait because I'm a photographer. That's what I did. And we would combine those stories and photographs. And so the first two books that we produced were really stories. They were other people's stories. It was simply a short profile, an excerpt from the person's interview, and a portrait. First book was all stories out of Minnesota, where I started. Second book, there's the first book.
Gotcha.
Second book, that color one, if you scroll a little higher on that screen, there it is. Second book was stories from a 40,000-mile journey across the United States. This new one that's coming out in September, Portraits of Peace, that one really is my story. It's more of a narrative. There's less photography, there's more words, and it's really a memoir. It's about my experience of encountering difference, of going outside of my comfort zone, of understanding where my blind spots are, learning how to be a better ally, and continuing to see the beauty and wisdom that's all around us.
Gotcha. So does this start, is this book the outgrowth of the pandemic? Like the first book was an outgrowth of the financial crisis?
No, it started a little sooner than that. This had been bouncing around in my head for years. I think I started writing it probably about 2 years before the pandemic. actually received the book offer from Broadleaf right in the early days of the pandemic. So I guess you could say the pandemic gave me the time to put the finishing touches on it.
Gotcha. And I mean, tell the story. I mean, these individual stories are in your first two books. What are you trying to get across in this most recent book?
Yeah, so the most recent book, like I said, is really my journey of exploration. What I want to encourage people to do, one, is to listen deeply. You know, that has been my process for building this project. That has been my process for engaging with these folks that I meet out on the road. So to listen deeply, to challenge our expectations, you know, because each of these stories, when I encounter somebody, we always meet somebody and we go in with certain preconceived notions. And my process has been to try to set those aside, to try to hear beyond my expectations, to try to understand the subtleties and complexities of a fuller story. So that's the second goal. The third goal really is to encourage people to stay at the table, to continue in dialogue, to continue building relationship. You know, as individuals and as a nation, I worry that we're leaning really quickly into conflict. We're leaning into contention as opposed to compassion. And I really want to encourage people to assume the best, to be willing to return to the table, to be willing to do the hard work of building relationships that are going to weave a stronger social fabric.
And what's it like? Like, I mean, it seems like we're in such a technological era with our phones and that interpersonal element. Even if you go to a restaurant, people are on their phones with four people. What's it like to actually just sit down and listen and talk without a lot of biases?
Yeah, you know what? It's a really rare and lovely thing to be able to push aside all of the distractions, to be able to just engage in a full conversation, and really deeply listen to people. You know, these are almost without exception people that I've never met before. I do have most of these interviews coordinated before I leave home because I want to make sure that I'm productive. And so things are scheduled and lined up, but we've really not had an encounter. We've really not had an engagement before. So like I say, these are like hour-long conversations. And when people feel like they're really being listened to, when people feel deeply heard and respected in the process, that's a powerful experience. And I'll say that probably in 70 to 80% of these conversations, one or both of us wind up in tears at some point, just because it's a really powerful human connection to be able to have that sort of conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so rare just to sit down and actually talk to somebody for a long period of time, some random person you don't really know. I mean,
you're doing it now, William, so I'd say we're off to a good start.
Okay, well, hopefully I won't break down in tears by the end.
Well, yeah, let's aim for that.
Okay, you asked the question, why peace, at the intro to your book. Why are we striving for that goal?
Yeah, well, you know, so I guess I didn't really clearly say this. The core question around this whole body of work is, what does peace mean to you? Now, that's not the question we lead with, and it's not the only question we ask, but the conversations are sort of built around that. And really, it's because for me, most people I've met in the world, I think, would welcome a little bit more peace into their lives. You know, whether it's their immediate family or their larger community or the world at large. Even my friends who serve in the U.S. military, I think, would prefer to stay home with their families whenever possible. So peace is this word that we toss around really loosely, but I'm not sure that we're very good at making it. We're not very good at getting peace. And so you'll have an activist who might flash, hold up a sign and say, give peace a chance, but they can't get along with their immediate family members. Right. You know, you'll have a high school student that might flash the peace sign when they walk down the hallway, but then they'll form into cliques and bully their own classmates. So there's a disconnect between what we say we value and how we live our day-to-day lives. And that's sort of a fascinating human exploration to me from a sociological standpoint. But also, I think that we need to understand that our actions matter. That if we say we value these things, that we actually apply that to how we live our day-to-day lives. And not only that, but the question of peace, even though it's a really simple question, it opens the door to all sorts of other really interesting, complex conversations around race and social justice and gender and economic inequalities, international policy. It really sort of blows open the gates for people to have a conversation about what's close to their heart. And that's really what was interesting to me.
Right. So it doesn't just mean personal peace too either. It means political peace. I mean, peace has all of its connotations. I mean, when you're talking to people, are you asking them those questions? What does peace mean to you? How do you work towards peace in your life? Do you ask all the people you meet that?
Yeah. Though there is a certain set of questions that I always bring into the conversation. What does peace mean to you? How do you work towards it in your life? What are some of the obstacles that get in the way? Tell me a time when you've seen a great example of peace in your own life. That's where it really starts going from the theoretical to the grassroots sort of practical level. And I find that interesting. But we don't start the conversations there. I literally start every conversation by saying, tell me your name and where on earth we're sitting today. And the second question is, if I didn't know anything about you, what do you want me to know? Because I want people to come to the table with their better angels. I want people to come to the table feeling recognized and seen and heard. And that's not up to me to define what that is. If I've gone into conversations that I thought were going to be about the environment, but they wound up being about domestic abuse. I've gone into conversations that I thought were going to be about faith, but they wound up being about same-sex marriage. I've gone into conversations that I thought were going to be about business, but they've wound up being about the environment. And so I want to give people the agency and the empowerment to take the conversations where they want. Right. The other thing that does is most of these people I interview are not, these are not celebrities. These are not media darlings, and they're not always people who are comfortable being interviewed. So some people you can walk in and you can see in their body language that they're a little nervous. They don't want to do this wrong. They don't quite know where it's going to go. When I open the conversation, giving them the ability to steer it, they start to relax and they start to understand that they're going to have agency, and that sort of empowerment really opens a space where some rich conversations can unfold.
I mean, and it's really kind of a piece of Americana when you're really talking to the average person on the street. That's such a rainbow of different ethnicities and genders and ages. I mean, I feel like this is, you title the chapter American Stories. Do you get the impression that you're really taking a snapshot of America at these times in your different books?
Yeah, that's really my hope. That's really my goal. There's an oral historian by the name of Studs Terkel. Yeah, and he's always been a hero of mine. And someday, if somebody describes me as Studs Terkel with a camera, I'll be thrilled to death. But Studs was brilliant at being able to see that rich fabric, these individual stories that when you put them together form the fabric of who we are. And that's always been my goal for this project, to see more completely who we are as a society. And so I've been very intentional about inviting Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Buddhist, Hindu, atheist, agnostic voices. I've been really intentional about including Black and Hispanic and Asian voices into the project. As I bring, so I've got these 4 traveling exhibits as well that we bring around the country to share these stories in public spaces, and we use them to build public dialogue around issues. As I've done that, there are times when people have come up to me and pointed out where I have failed in that broad net that I've tried to cast. So I had an Ojibwe woman walk up to me and say, "Hey, I don't see any indigenous voices in this series. Where am I?" And when I hear that, I have to recognize that that omission. And then it's incumbent upon me to be intentional to invite those voices in. You know, a mother who had a child with a disability who said, "Hey, I don't see anyone with a physical disability here. Why am I not important enough to include?" And so then I have to be intentional to include those voices. And that's how it becomes more complete. And that's how it becomes more representative. What I hope is that everybody can see themselves reflected in some way in this series, feel comfortable, and then move on and explore some other perspectives as well.
Well, when you say reflective, what are the commonalities you find, even from this very diverse group of people? Like, we have our own little I find that all people have their own small social circles they're operating in, whether it's work or outside of work. So you just don't see, maybe won't see an indigenous person or somebody who's handicapped. What kind of some commonalities did you find when you took a snapshot of all those different people?
Yeah, you know, I think you're right, William. I think we all live in a bubble, and we work with people that are like us. We live with people that are like us. We surround ourselves and travel in circles that are very like ourselves. And pretty soon we're so immersed in the bubble that we don't even know what we don't know. And so for me, you know, part of this learning process is to educate myself, because every time I sit down and have one of these interviews, I wind up learning a little bit more about the world, understanding it a little bit better. You know, there are all sorts of themes that I've encountered, but the one profoundly resonant theme that I see over and over again is that people want to be seen, heard, and valued. You know, and when they have that sense of acknowledgement, when they have that sense of recognition, and when they have that sense of value, that washes over a lot of other things. And when you look at most of the social struggles we have in this country, I think that you could dissect them and you could see that at the root of it is people who don't feel seen, people who don't feel heard, and people who don't feel valued. You know, and so that if I had to choose one overarching theme that I see in this series, that would be it.
It's just not just somebody just to listen and really value them. It seems like the communication, the technology blurbs, and not, you know, superficial. When was the last time you've really sat down across somebody and talked for 15 or 30 minutes? I literally, personally, can't really remember too many of those in the recent months, you know.
Well, so, yeah, and so especially with the pandemic, right? That's been exacerbated. That what I hope we can learn, and what I've learned certainly through this process of engaging across difference, I hope we can take this lesson away from the pandemic, that we are all a little bit more vulnerable than we thought we were. You know, things changed on a dime for us. Things changed quickly for a lot of people I know. And the other lesson I hope we can take away from the pandemic is that we're all more connected than we ever realized. You know, whoever the truck driver is that brings the toilet paper from the plant to the store, if he's sick and he can't work, suddenly there's a toilet paper shortage in the entire country. You know, that's sort of a silly anecdote, but seriously, we are all connected in ways that we don't often take the time to acknowledge.
Right. I mean, there was a lot. I mean, the pandemic really changed it gave them pause to really think about what's kind of important, but also their connections, at least to their internal social circle. I don't remember mixing with a lot of people. But right now you're kind of on the road, right? So, what are you finding when you're kind of driving around? Are you still kind of interviewing? I know this book is fairly recent, but did you interview people while you were on the road?
Yeah, in fact, that's been the goal. So October of last year, my wife Karen and I sold our home in Bloomington, Minnesota, where we lived for 20 years. You know, our kids are grown. I'm not sure that, and we bought an RV and we hit the road. I'm not sure that launching into RV life in the middle of a pandemic is probably the wisest thing in the world, but we figured we could be just as safe isolating in a trailer as we could in a house. We figured that we could let me back up a little bit and tell you that during the pandemic, I live in Minneapolis. So our house is 11 and a half miles south of where George Floyd was killed. Besides these long form interviews with A Piece of My Mind, I also do these short form interviews where we'll set up a studio, we'll come up with a prompt, and we'll ask people to respond in 25 words or less. We shoot a black and white portrait, we add their quote over the top of it, and by the end of a day, actually, if you're on the website, scroll up to the menu at the top. You can see some of it. Or go to the homepage. Just click on the square black and white book there. Yeah, so you can click on that upper right-hand corner, the black and white portrait of the woman. Oh, I'm sorry.
You want to hit Project Sanctuary?
There. Project Sanctuary, yeah. And then scroll down a little bit, and so you'll see there, in the course of a couple of days, we gathered a whole body of work there. In this case, we just asked people, what do you want people to understand? And these are their responses. But I did this at the intersection of 38th and Chicago, where George Floyd was killed in 2020. I set up this little studio, and I just asked people, what do you want to say? Simply as a way to listen, simply as a way to hear what was on the community's heart. And again, to say, I see you, I hear you, and you matter. So that was my first venture out during the pandemic. And we realized that there were ways we could do it. We could mask ourselves, we could stay at a distance, we could still do the work that we wanted to do to talk about some of these important social issues and stay safe in a pandemic. So that's when we decided to leave. So our goal this time was to dig in a little bit deeper and wade into the most challenging social issues that we're facing as a country. And so we went to, Mississippi and talked about Confederate statues. We went down into Louisiana to talk about land loss. We went along the border to talk about immigration issues. And always with an eye, I mean, these are really complicated issues, right? And they're super heated politically, but we went to these places to interview people, always with an eye on finding folks who were looking for creative solutions to our most challenging issues. People who believed that something better was possible and were doing, some really creative work on the ground to try to make that happen. So since we left in October of last year, we've driven 43,000 miles. It's not been a straight line. It's not been an efficient path, but we go where the doors open. We look for opportunities where people want to have these conversations, and that leads us there.
And what doors have opened for you? Like, have people invited you? Have you seen places? Do you go to places where there's conflict or things that are happening in the news?
Yeah, like Arizona is a great example. Down along the border, all of January. So I'm from Minnesota. Minnesota is a bad place to be living in a trailer in January. So clearly we're looking for places in the South. I'm not foolish. But I had a friend from high school. Actually, it was a person I didn't know in high school, but we've reconnected. And she does a lot of advocacy work down along the border. She works with a small nonprofit called Voices from the Border that tries to make an impact in some of the things that are going on down there. And she said, hey, if you want to come down here and have some of these conversations, I can connect you. I can hook you up, because I always need an advocate like that in a community. If I want to have those conversations, being from the outside, I don't know who to talk to. I don't know the right connections. I don't know how to break through the noise of their busy schedules. But with an advocate like India Aubrey is her name, she was able to connect me with folks down there. So we talked to asylum seekers, we talked to activists, but also we talked to Border Patrol agents, people who were working on economic issues, ranchers down there. So really, again, try to cast a broad net to hear these various perspectives, because of course no single person has a lock on the truth. No single person has a full understanding of everything that's going on. But if I talk to a rancher who comes at it from this direction, and a border patrol agent from over here, and an advocate and an activist from over here, you start to put those things together, and you start to get a fuller picture of what's going on in the world. As it happened, we were down there at the transition of presidential power when Biden took office. And of course, one of his more immediate and controversial choices was to stop construction of the border wall. We happened to find the spot where the construction stopped, just east of Nogales, the day that construction halted. Had we gone there the day before, I'm sure we wouldn't have been able to get to the site, because there would have been work crews there and they would have held us at a distance. But we went there the day that construction ceased. There was nobody there. Well, there were a couple of guys for the contractors who were guarding the equipment that was idled and parked. But otherwise, it was just us standing where the fence went from a 30-foot metal barrier to 4 strands of barbed wire.
Wow, that's
incredible. There was nobody else around. And so for me, that's historically and socially, that's kind of hallowed ground. And so the opportunity to be in those sorts of spaces and just reflect and just bear witness and just listen to what's going on in the community is really rich for me.
And it almost seems like that's the goal of these projects, is to break down those barriers. So there you are, a barrier that divides humanity for a variety of different reasons: cultural, ethnic, linguistic, and there it's gone. And that's a much more dangerous place. Like, you talk about uncomfortableness or being uncomfortable. Why are we so comfortable with barriers between people? Is it just more safe? Do people feel more safe, or why should we embrace what's uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think it's really true. We do that. I mean, we do that as a nation, but we do that individually as well. We put up defenses. We put up barriers to protect ourselves. But, and I'm not saying that this is a universal analogy, but in that process, in this interpersonal process, when we put up those barriers to protect ourselves, sure, you do keep yourself safe from a certain amount of harm, but in the process, you also eliminate the potential for deep human connection. And so I think in that notion of trying to protect ourselves, we pay a really high price for that in our disconnection from other human beings.
Yeah, you're totally disconnected. Yeah. I mean, I think that's it. I mean, I think that, so you are traveling. So you were in, what other places have you been to, or environments where you've learned so many different angles about human events?
Yeah, like I say, we were in Mississippi and we were talking about Confederate monuments. And, I recognize that being a northern middle-aged white guy myself, to come down into Mississippi and start exploring some of these things, sometimes there's nothing less welcome than an outsider coming in and telling you how you should do things. Well, of course, that's not my goal. My goal is not to come anywhere and tell people how to do things. My goal is to come places and listen and learn. So we actually, but of course, Confederate monuments have been in the news a lot lately, and they're rallying points for political.
Right, Charlottesville, right? Charlottesville.
Yeah, Charlottesville. I've been to Charlottesville too. Shortly after Heather Heyer was killed there, I don't remember the year. Several years ago now.
2017. It was during Trump, right? 2017, 20.
Yeah,
still symbolically important, something like that.
Yeah. If I remember right, that Robert E. Lee statue was just recently removed, right?
Yeah. So that was what the whole thing was about. The white supremacists came out against the removal of the Robert E. Lee statue. Yeah.
Right. And so we, Oxford, Mississippi, again, I had some connections there. I had some folks that I knew there, and they have 2 Confederate monuments, prominent Confederate monuments in town. One of them was on the campus of the University of Mississippi. The second one is right in front of their courthouse. Oxford is the county seat for Lafayette County, if I'm remembering right. So the one on campus, they first recontextualized. They put a little plaque down at the bottom of it explaining some of the history. Then they decided that they wanted to relocate it. They didn't tear it down. They relocated it to a Confederate cemetery that was on campus, a less central place. At the courthouse, they had voted, the county board of supervisors voted to keep the monument standing where it was. So we simply went to that monument on the courthouse lawn and set up our studio and asked people, what does this statue mean to you? And we just listened, and I didn't know if that would be welcome. I didn't know if people would participate. I didn't know if I'd get beat up. I mean, I'm being a little flippant, but I didn't know. But we wanted to go there and see. And as it turned out, people had, a very reasonable response to it. People were willing to talk. I think we had 37 people share their stories. And then we also did some long form interviews in the area as well while I was there.
Now, are you filming? Are you video filming? Or are you just taking pictures of those interviews or audio?
Yeah, I'm not a video guy. And if I had more capacity or if I had a crew with me, I think it would be really interesting. But I'm trained and steeped in the tradition of still photography. And so we do the recorded audio interview. And then I do a still portrait.
And when you're talking face to face with these people, how long do they want to talk? Are you finding them very voluble, or what's the average duration of these conversations?
Yeah, like you, I tell people it's going to be about an hour, and sometimes that means it's a little less. Sometimes it means a little bit more. But we don't ever run out of things to say. That's for sure.
People want to talk, and so. I mean, I think just having somebody to sit down and talk with is therapeutic, cathartic, psychologically. You can talk to another human being who's listening. Just that is, these days is so vitally important. I mean, what's it like when you see through their lens? You talk about, what are the universals? Do you see these kind of universal traits in humanity when you've accumulated that many interviews?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of where to go with that. The universal trait for myself is an awareness of how much I don't know. I like to. I have this exercise. In fact, it's in the introduction of the book that I wrote. It's a little exercise, and I'll tell you, I'm really. There, get it in the camera. I'm really sensitive to understanding the current visual of this. I've got my
your
finger and my thumb in a circle, and I have come to understand that can be a white supremacist circle. I am reclaiming it for other purposes.
Okay, good.
It is. I will clearly state it's not that. But this is an exercise I do with little kids. I say, make a small circle with your thumb and forefinger. Now imagine that all of the knowledge that you've ever had, everything that you've ever experienced, is contained in that little circle. Clearly, more than that. But using that as a symbol, now show me how big the circle would have to be to contain all of the knowledge that's ever been known in the entire universe. And the kids laugh and they stretch their arms out wide and they say, "Oh, you can't even make a circle that big." And I said, that's exactly what I try to remember every time I go into an interview with somebody. Because when I'm sitting down with somebody, our circles might overlap a little bit. I might be a parent and they might be a parent, or I'm a man and they're a man, or I'm an artist and they're an artist. But I also know that there are some things in their circle that I've never experienced before. And my goal when I sit with these folks is to see if I can't make my circle a little bit bigger, to see if I can't hear some things that are going to share some knowledge with me so that I can have a little bit bigger understanding of the world. And so when you talk about universal themes, that's one of them that I sense in myself. The other is that, especially now in our society, we're so quick to jump into that contention. We're so quick to go directly to that rawest, most difficult moment. And I say in the book that we jump right into the fire and then we get surprised when we get burned. These things never go well. We never navigate them well. But what we forget to do is invest the time and the energy in building a foundation, in starting a relationship, in beginning a conversation that can get us there. But we just start out with those most contentious issues, and we haven't got the foundation and the bandwidth to be able to navigate it well.
Yeah, it's something about the political parties. There's something about this constant duality and inability to see commonality too, I think, in people, that the black versus white, Republican versus Democrat, left versus right, blah, blah, blah.
Well, so, there's let me just jump on that for a second, William, and say there's a couple that I interviewed, and I share their story in Portraits of Peace. It's Fred and Judy Barron, and they're Holocaust survivors, and they were in Bergen-Belsen concentration camp together. And Fred tells this story about the fact that Bergen-Belsen was not at the front. There was not active combat going on there. So because of that, the guards and the soldiers who were confining them there, they had their families living with them. And so they would live just outside of the fence. And Fred said that they could look through the fence and they could see these soldiers interacting with their spouses, and they were good. From all appearances, they looked like good husbands. You see them interacting with their children, and they looked like good parents, but then they would turn on the inmates and treat them like animals. And I thought, one thing that really struck me about that conversation is that Fred could see any bit of humanity or exhibit any sort of grace for those people who were essentially trying to put him to death. And I think in our current climate, when we decide somebody is bad, we can only see what's bad about them. It's confirmation bias. We will work overtime to find other things that show how bad those people are, and we will conveniently neglect any evidence that shows that they might be human or that they might be reasonable. And for me, that ability of Fred to see any shred of humanity in his adversaries is a remarkable show of grace and humanity.
Yeah, we've also kind of caricaturized people too. I think that this project you're involved in really shows like the common humanity or just the inherent humanity of a human being. Wants to be listened to.
We attach a label, and nothing else matters. We fill in all of the blanks of what else we need to know about that person, whether it's true or not, based on that single two-dimensional label.
Right. It's something about the human condition. It's just easier for us going day to day to just figure out a label. That's you. Okay, moving on, instead of kind of having a more holistic kind of view. So the title of the book is Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. It's being published September 21st, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And where's the best place to get it?
You can get it anywhere you buy books. You can go to the big ones if you want. You can go to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, IndieBound. Broadleaf Books is the publisher. You can go right to their website. You can also walk into any independent bookstore where you like to get books. You can say the name of the title, and they'll be able to pre-order it for you. And
then your other two books you say are self-published. Where are those available at your website?
Yeah, those are just on the website. apieceofmymind.net, or like you said, the acronym APOMM.net.
Peaceofmymind.net, APOMM.net. And again, the title of the book is Portraits of Peace, Searching for Hope in a Divided America. Thank you so much, John Noltner, Noltner. Appreciate it. Well, one more thing. Where's the social media? People want to reach out to you or contact you. Do you have email, or is the contact information on your website?
Oh, yeah. If you go to the website, there's a contact page. You can send me a note. There's also links to all of our social media. We're most active on Instagram, APOMM Stories. You can just go to Facebook, A Piece of My Mind, PEACE, and Twitter, A Piece of My Mind 1.
Really fascinating. Good, really great work. So kudos to you. Appreciate it. Thanks so much for your time, John.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you, William. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care. Okay, so that's